Hello, hello. Welcome to the Brave to be Multipassionate podcast. I'm your host, Kate Kim. Today, I invited Lisa Zawrotny on the show, really laying the great foundation of kicking off my first guest episode. This is a great entryway for you to understand what multi-passionate's like and what you can learn from a conversation like this. So, without a further ado, let's get started. All right, Lisa, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today because I want to know your story, but I feel like we need to hear more of these stories. So I'm super pumped, but let's start with a little bit of introduction. Who are you? Where do you live? And what do you do?
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here talking about this being multi-passionate, because I think it's so incredibly important. I agree with you 100% that we need to start talking about it more. We need to find our people. It's the multi-passionates are the people that I coach and I love and who I am. So let's start with that, who I am. On the business side. Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa Zawrotny. I am the founder of Positively Productive Systems, and I'm the host of the Positively Living podcast. I'm a productivity and organizing coach, certified in time and stress management, and I use simplicity, self, and systems as a way to help and support multi-passionate creatives to boost their productivity and to balance business and family. That's a real big one that we're always searching for, because again, it's like that integration of life. And we do this all simply and sustainably. That's the real important part here, because we want to avoid burnout. That's my goal, to help people do that. Why? Because I've lived it. I've been at burnout. I've been in survival mode, and I know what to avoid and how to help. And on that personal side, in addition to knowing all that, I'm a wife, I'm a mom to 2 kiddos and cats. And my love languages include Venn diagrams. I mentioned that to you before. Music, coffee, any kind of coffee, and having conversations through GIFs and movie quotes, anything like that. I guess, it all comes back to anything creative and fun.
Oh my God, Lisa, we can't talk. There's so much to talk about. Okay. Well, first of all, let's time travel a little bit. For me, I've only discovered the word multi-passionate just last year, and it explained so much of who I am. I want to hear about your journey growing up. When did you first realize that you are more than just one thing? What was the environment was like? And
Yeah, well, mine is very recent too. So I guess I'll describe a little bit of what my path looked like, and being an entrepreneur and helping others, and exploring my world. That is what helped me understand this whole idea of multi-passionate. But the way that I lived, I was able to look back and say, oh, that's what it is. So I feel like you and I have had similar paths that way. Growing up, I love to learn. I love to learn new things, to explore, to do creative things. And I'm talking creative in any way. And these things still hold true today. Like, in addition to the things that I mentioned that I do, there's so much more. I'm also a musician and a singer. And I will do art, maybe not quite as much as my daughter, who's an incredible artist, but I will do that. Paint night, count me in, I'm there. And anything sort of crafty, but one of my favorites is actually like baking. And as my kids say, I mean, it's edible art.
love that.
When you're working with the frosting. And we've done some incredible stuff. It's actually on my Instagram, like the cup. We've done a lot of decorative cupcakes, like floral cupcakes and things like that. So this has been a trend for me for a very long time, and that I love to explore all these different creative outlets and learn different things. And I would say that was like accepted and maybe nurtured in many ways, right? Because that's a creative part of it. But on the side of like getting employment, right? Looking for a job or figuring out what you're going to be doing with your life, or going to college, that's where that constant search, that different interest, that may be a difficulty to choose. And I think all of these things I'm describing are ways that you can go back and be like, I may be a multi-passionate if these are the things that I perhaps have been challenged by. And that's what I discovered. And so in a way, it looked like I was quitting a lot. Like I have a resume that's varied and it
Yep.
involves, right? So it's like, it was really difficult because I guess the benchmark that was always given to me was you choose something and you go with it and you show loyalty and you stick with it and you don't quit. There's a lot of messages that we're given. And growing up, I took those to heart, but then my heart was also being like, okay, I get what you're saying, but this is not me. Like I remember going to school for business because I was in business and I wasn't really sure what I was choosing. That's a whole nother podcast for another day about why we make high school kids choose what their career is going to be. Hello? Can we not have some time to explore and try things? That was what I experienced. And I went to school for business because my parents were in business and it made sense. And I was miserable. So I changed it and I kept trying to fit within that guideline and I tried different things. And finally, when none of it was working and I was practically failing out, and mind you, I was like a Regent scholar and I was like a really good student. What's happening here? I looked at what I was doing well, what I really loved, and it was English. So I got a degree in English Lit. And then I moved on to a degree in library science because I was like, okay, let's double down on, on the bibliophile life. And then even then, when I was searching for opportunities, I was pulled in different directions because of the values that I had. I wanted to be with family, and this job would mean moving far away. So I kept sort of changing direction and exploring and trying things. And the thing of it is that I could get different jobs and I would succeed at each of them. And that's another thing. That's another clue you can look for is not only are multi-passionates multi-interested, but they're multi-talented.
Yeah.
They can achieve a lot of different things. So wherever they're going, I would land on my feet, but it started to feel a little off because I would feel like it wasn't quite fitting, or I would try something and then I'd learn it. And then I'd be like, I think I'm done. And honestly, the more that I did that, I was being true to myself, but I was feeling incredibly guilty and ashamed, actually. And that was something you and I had chatted about a little bit. And it was the big thing for me, the big challenge that it breaks my heart that I felt that way. And I would love to release others from ever feeling that way.
Yeah.
That following your truth, following your values and your heart and your interests is not quitting. It's not a source of shame. It's who you are. And it took me a long time to make peace with that because I felt like I don't have any other choice. And I make excuses or I'd pull things together. I'd try different stuff, or I moved, or I'm in a new area and I have to do something different. But really, ultimately, it's what I wanted, and I had to be true to that. And stepping into coaching finally allowed me to say, but look at all that experience I have now.
Yeah.
I've worked with so many people. It's like, you've been in network marketing? Same. You've done real estate? Me too. You've done photography? Yep.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I have this varied background that feeds into a different understanding of, life and
Yeah.
business and the challenges that we have. And I get to feed all that into coaching. So that's where I found peace with it. And then I started to see like, oh, okay, there's others like me. And of course, Emily Watnick and
Yeah.
the multi-potentialite, that was like, thank you.
Yeah.
You get it. And now before that, there were hints. I mentioned different terms that we've heard from time to time. And if you go back to Da Vinci, great example, right? I mean, he was a military consultant, an architect. He was an artist. The term was polymath.
Yeah.
So I think there were hints of that as I went. I was like, oh, there are people out there. Or the whole concept of a Renaissance man, right? Renaissance woman. I remember at some point in my career, someone saying that that's what I was. They're like, "Oh, you're a Renaissance woman." I'm like, "Okay." Like, so there were hints,
Uh-huh.
but I think with the coaching and with the terms coming out of
Okay.
multi-potentialite, multi-passion, all that, that's when I was like, "Okay, I found my people."
Yeah, you went through your journey as you described like perfectly. I feel like we share a lot of similarity that whatever we step into, we succeed. Once you achieve that, you're like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing. It's that it was simply I just like, you know what? I want something else. And from that journey, like we give ourselves such a hard time because in the society tells us that you need to find that one thing. And for me,
Yeah,
not being able to find that, it's like such a guilt and shame. And like, I think that is what a lot of people are going through. And I wanted to dig deeper into, and you mentioned that awaken moment. Once I
right.
kind of open up that into, oh, there's such a thing. And then people telling me, oh, there's polymath. And then I dig in more information. And then I'm like, okay, there are gazillion confirmation that there's nothing wrong with me. So I want to hear your
Mm.
that awaken moment. What did that shift happen?
So now thinking back to it, I mentioned that earlier in my career, the more corporate related career, there were mentions of this like being a Renaissance woman. But I will tell you, there was a caveat in that. And it may be like what you're saying is we're not ready to hear something if we're still feeling guilt and shame, or we're just trying to block things out, whatever it is, something isn't clicking. Well, this idea of being a Renaissance woman to me at the time meant I have many interests, but not that those are my career, right? It was like making that distinction of saying, okay, I'm still doing this quote one thing. I'm still trying to figure out what my thing is. And this is the thing I'm doing currently. Like you said, you do it until you're like, I'm ready for the next thing. And so I was still on that search. I think it was doing the thing intuitively and then moving on, but still with the mindset, I'm supposed to be finding the thing that I'm going to stick with for good. So that was that. And then the rest of my life, the outside of my career, were all these other things that I was doing. And it was a bit challenging to come to terms with the idea that it's actually could be combined. And I got a hint of it when I started doing work as a voice talent because I liked it so much that I was
I
like,
was
but I
gonna
want
say, like, your voice sounds so good. I was like, she's gotta be doing something with that. You can carry on.
thank you. I did at one point, and of course now I get to do podcasting and interviews, so I feel like I get to like jump right back into that interest and that passion, and I love it. But I had this idea that I could do this. I was like, I think I can. Let me figure out how. And so it became, the first iteration of a side hustle for me. But again, it wasn't my quote career, doing the air quotes here. And so I didn't allow that to be like, oh, I could go into that, or that could be the full-time thing, or that could just be the thing that I do in addition, or that I combine. It was still that concept that it was just a side thing. I kept going again, making these changes, exploring things. And when I did have an opportunity to move, I had gotten together with my husband and I'd moved into a different area. And it kind of opened up okay, I can let go of the corporate side. I did telecommute for a while and all those practical things, but then it opened up to, oh, we're running a business together. And oh, when you're a business owner, I think that's when things can really open up to the possibilities of what combination would this be. I think it was the corporate life that kept me constrained.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
with that in mind, it was like, ooh, okay, what are the possibilities? I could do this and this and this. And I started to play around with, I did freelance work. I did, copywriting and editing, which was, a big part of my background and marketing and communications. And I did do real estate, and my husband and I had a photography business, and it was a big mix. And there was, I don't want to call it exactly a break in time, but it was a shift because I became a caregiver for my mom. And that's a really big part of my story of becoming the coach that I am today. So, with that time, it was like I had to step away from every traditional thing And I was in survival mode, caring for her. She had Alzheimer's. And then I also had my children at the time. So it was like full on caregiver mom mode. And it was almost like hitting pause on all that other stuff that was happening. It's like, if there's an opportunity to do freelance work, great. It was, you just ran with it. There was no expectations, I think. And in a way, as difficult as that was, there was a gift in there, because when I no longer needed to care for her, I stepped back and I was like, okay, what's next? The My first gut instinct was, I need to get back into a career. I need to, find a job. And something stopped me and said, whoa, 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 wait, you need to clear a path. You need to clean up. You need to take care of yourself again. And so I went through a decluttering inside and out. And that's really what drives everything that I do today as a productivity coach in a very holistic sense. But when I did that, I also learned that I had the opportunity to create a world. I had a life lesson, huge life lesson, to carry me through, to say, we don't have to do it like we did it before. And I think that was the foundation for my aha moment, that I get to mix and match how I want.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. But can we just acknowledge how talented you are in like various, I can't even like can't take count of real estate, photography, musician, voice actor. There's just so much that you do. And that's one thing that I'm so passionate about. I usually tell people like you should really keep a track of your talent journal. Like
Hmm.
we often forget that we do a lot of different things and we are good at many different things. And when it comes to choosing something, like how can I integrate all those things that I know how to do and what I want to do and all together? Well, first of all, laid it all out. Let's see where we are at. But I feel like that is such a great point, because it's not just about, and also I don't want to like downgrade corporate life. It's
No.
amazing of its own. And it's about us stepping into the power of like knowing what would work for us, and we just choose that life. So what I found, which I want to know a little bit about your childhood, a lot of times though, I hear people like they have been living in the mindset they had to pick something. For me,
Mm.
my parents never forced me to do anything. So it was all my choice. But the society, still the cultural barriers and this norm is
Yeah.
what made me go through that whole route. But tell us about your journey.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that it's not always about being in a family where, there's expectations that you have to be, or follow a certain career path. And you're right. My family was incredibly supportive. I actually grew up with entrepreneurs. I grew up in a family business, and I don't think there was any expectation that I would go into the family business, but it was definitely a different kind of environment, because I could see the possibilities of being an entrepreneur. Although I did get some messages from them in terms of the way they approached being entrepreneurs and business owners, and some of those messages of, if you're going to make the money, you have to be there and you have to work. Like, they never took vacations and things like that. So I'm unpacking a lot of that now. However, I did see the potential for owning your own business and having that control. And there really wasn't an expectation as to where I should go. But I would say that so many conversations involve people that are really just trying to protect you and keep you from risk. And I think that when we're multi-passionate and when we're entrepreneurs, there there's a lot of perceived risk by others. So I agree with you. Corporate can be amazing. And there were so many opportunities, so many things that I learned. I'm grateful for all of it. But I also know that it's not for me. And it goes back to something you said, the power of choice, right? And in that, you can be multi-passionate and you can be corporate. You have surgeons who have rock bands, on the weekends, and you can combine however you want in whatever structure. But for me, I think it was, I don't know, just trying out let me go see about employment. Let me get this degree, and society in general, and all the conversations that you have, and even how things are structured, how the schools are structured, how guidance counselors work. All of that pushes you to choose, but not the way we're talking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, that is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about getting this out in the world, because
Mm,
I wish that I heard this more of these stories when I was younger. Like I wish it was more
yes.
generalized, normalized, known as a okay thing, so that we have an option to choose. If we're not that one thing, it's okay to choose. And your clarity will come from your action. It's never come from your thoughts. Like, but once I have done it, then I know, okay, this is not for me, or yeah, I like to do that for the next couple of years or whatever it is,
Right.
right?
And I don't think we talk enough about how it's okay. There's not just this one choice and then you did it. Great. Go you win. And then if you didn't, you screwed up. It's not like that at all. And that, of course, ties into other aspects of mindset work I'm constantly doing for myself and my clients, which is, this concept of failure. How about we try and it's a win or a learn? And even a learn is a win. So really, it's a
It's a
win-win.
win-win.
Just try and see. And sometimes the only way you can know is to try. And sometimes the only way you can get to where you're meant to go is to try. Where I am now came from that path that I took of all those things that, quote, didn't work or worked for a year or really didn't work right away. What was I thinking? Well, I was thinking, let's try this, or here's an opportunity. And you just, you went with it. I
Yeah.
think we need to open that up so much more. And the other thing, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's kind of like the stories that we're encouraged to create, if you will, or the messages that we're fed. And I think one of those is that the creative, the people who try different things were considered flighty and
Mm,
irresponsible, right? And maybe not loyal. And it was these sort of negative attributes. And for those of us who are like, that's not my intention. I'm definitely loyal and I want
mm,
to hang around, but I also don't want to overstay my welcome either. If this is not working for me, I think there's
right.
great courage in knowing when something isn't for you. It's easy to know
Yeah.
when something is for you, but to know that something isn't and to walk away, that takes great courage.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I accidentally kind of started doing that when I was younger. Let's say I got this job, and then my intention is to learn everything that I can learn. Usually, we are very fast learners. We learn
Yes.
everything, and my goal here is to innovate something. Let's make this place better than it was before I came in. So then, once I innovate, I teach everything that I learned to the next person, and I leave for the next quest. So then I have no guilt around it. It's not like I didn't make an impact. It's me being very intentional, and then I use my time fully to the maximum and I move on.
Right. When you step in with the intention to learn fully and do the best you possibly can, that's all that anyone can really
Yeah.
ask of you. Really. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And somewhere in there you learn something, the other people who are with you learn something. There's always a positive to take with you. But again, imagine how many times have I done that where I've stayed longer than really I'm meant to. So
Mm,
that's a beautiful thing to say. Now we go in the intentionality. Ooh, I mean, being intentional. It's one of my favorite things
yeah.
to say. I'm stepping in. It's more
Mhm.
of the experience and what can I bring? And what's more beautiful than saying, I'm going to step into something, a place, an environment, an experience, and I intend to leave it better than when I arrived.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, who was the most influential person growing up or up until this point, and how they influenced you?
One of the things, and I think this is a multi-passionate kind of thing, and liking and having so many interests, is this challenge to answer a question that involves single out or choose your favorite or choose one thing. So I'm just going to put it out there that this is difficult. But if I'm thinking back to my story of origin, if I'm thinking back to my childhood, my gut says, say dad, your father. Yes, absolutely. And I think it's because he was much older, but he had such a forward thinking way about him.
Mm,
He was ahead of his time in so many ways. he spoke to me about being a woman in a man's world, essentially, and what I would need to do. These perceptions, but he had them for my benefit, that I could do anything that I wanted to do, but here were some caveats and here were some things to be aware of. And he supported me fully and was like my biggest fan. He did teach me about leaving a place or space or a moment or a person better than when you arrived. And he didn't ever use those exact words, but thinking about this conversation now is such a gift to remember that is something that he instilled in me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I want to hear about a few more lessons that you learned that you think that this is very important that you want to spread in the world.
So, in talking about this idea of being multi passionate, doing these different things, going like to different jobs and then leaving and stuff like that, and how we've had, you and I have had it, and I'm sure you're listening right now, you probably experienced this too, of this idea that there was this shame surrounding it, right? And there's this idea of, oh, well, you quit and all that stuff. And my big life lesson is, ooh, let's reframe this and turn this around. Think about all the experience that you've gained that you now bring to other people. And but it's not just experience. It's not just, oh, I did that too. It's what comes from that experience. And one of the most important things to me is empathy. You've walked in so many different people's shoes as a result of what you have explored and tried. That is a beautiful gift for you and for them.
Okay, so now I can see why you are a coach because you're obviously amazing at it. So tell us a little bit about, how you help your clients. How do you go about your coaching career right now?
So, to step back for a moment in my description of saying that I learned the power of decluttering, right? And simplifying and doing that inside and outside, that is really the driving force of what I'm showing people, whether I'm teaching it on my podcast or I'm doing it one on one coaching, is saying, can we step back and uncomplicate things, right? And I do think that when you live a multi-passionate life and you have lots of different things that you are interested in and sort of bright shiny objects, it can feel a bit cluttered and a bit complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And I also want to be there to cheer you on. I don't believe that we need permission to do things, but for some reason, it feels good when we get it. And so I'm here cheerleading you to say, yes, you can like all these things. And no, that isn't clutter just because other people pick one thing and you've picked many things. But there are ways to manage, to
Mhm.
juggle, to allow for ebb and flow of these things such that you don't get burnt out in the process. And I love to take full inventory, not just what are you doing, but what do you love? And how do you tick? How do you work? I work on personality and value based systems, so that now we are designing and customizing the right habits and systems for you to approach these things. How are you structuring your days? How are you approaching the kind of habit that you need to automate your life in such a way that you do create the most efficiency and that you don't burn out and that you do infuse the joy of all these things that you love? To me, that's my favorite thing, is helping someone understand those ahas of, oh, well, that's why a morning routine wouldn't work for me, but everybody else out there is saying, oh, do this morning routine. And you're like, what? That sounds horrible. And I just love those aha moments where we figure it out. And it's like, no, and I'm able to, you talk about innovating. I'm able to be like, okay, we're trying to get from A to B. You're trying to get this thing done. You want to, whatever it is you want to do, you want to achieve things in your business, you want to exercise, or whatever it happens to be. What will that look like for you? That's what I like to figure out. And that's where the productivity and the organizing come in. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing the right things the right way at the right time for you.
Yes, 100%. So I'm also from corporate. So I love making system. I love, all these processes.
Mm-hmm.
And what learned is how can I create a system for myself that works best for me? Our brain works really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it may look like we're all over the place and scattered, but we're not. And we have no problem focusing. That's like what I'm trying to say all the time. And people like, because you moved on after 10 minutes sitting down, that doesn't mean that you're scattered or unfocused or whatever. Now what I have been built up recently is that I know how to use that 10 minutes to maximize the result. Once we figure out how our brain works
Yeah.
and find a system that works for us, that's like just enormous amount of shift and change. And
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. And that's the thing that I rail against is that I know that they're well-meaning, all the people who have, the systems and the products and the books and the things that are out there. They're like, here, 10x your productivity and do these things and organize this way. It's because it worked for them and they
exactly.
share it. And that's fine. That's fine. And you may have, in fact, and you likely have, if you're listening to this right now, because you love to learn and you love to research, purchase these things, try these things. And sometimes they've worked brilliantly because it was a match. I'm here when someone is like, I'm still frustrated. This is still not working right. Why is this not working right? And it's because there hasn't been that proper match. It's like
Mhm.
someone recommended this planner to me. I'm like, the planner is not going to plan for you. Or, hey, Trello could be cool. I love it, but I know lots of people that I work with and I would never suggest it.
Mhm.
You need, like you said, need to know how you work best, what's intuitive for your brain, what's going to be easy enough for you to keep doing consistently, because that overrides everything else. That is how you create and sustain habits.
Amen to that. Okay.
Right? Woo,
Let
preach.
yeah. Let's talk about tangible side. How are you tracking
Hmm.
your goals and actually making it happen? Your ritual, commitment, your belief system around it. You touched on a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. So there are a variety of ways that I track my information and I set my systems up. So I want to kind of set the scene for that first, because I use a lot of information systems to keep these things going. But I also journal. And here's the thing, there is a connection. And I notice you're writing a lot. I do the same thing when I'm interviewing on my podcast. Totally. There's a connection from our brains to our hands. And when we write down, actually, however you track, I guess that's the overriding message here that I want to make sure of. No matter what I say I do, however you track, what is measured will grow.
Mhm.
There's a psychological part to us where we track things. So I actually track habits in a bullet journal. That's my preference, because I like, again, it's not so much the creativity. It's not arts and crafts for me. It's more of the handwriting and the daily tracking and the processing, because I like to write and adjust and put things in there to describe what's
Yeah.
going on. So that's a big way that I achieve goals. And I'm talking about even small little goals, right? And then in the overarching thing, like, my 90-day strategies or things of that nature, that is set in Trello to be monitored. But again, I really think it all comes back to my processing, my weekly processing and my daily processing that I do in my bullet journal.
Yeah, very similar. I have like gazillion different journals for different purpose.
Yes, I get it. I get it.
So yeah, for me, same thing. Like, I love capturing all the things and then plan it out on my
Mhm.
Notion. I love using Notion.
Okay.
And
Yep.
yeah, and I love using Asana for my anything that project that I want to make sure that it's meeting whatever the timeline that I have it for. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely a note taker.
And I think that's so important, because there is a very special connection that studies have shown. This is not just, anecdotal here. This studies have shown the connection with handwriting.
Mm.
Now, the good news is there's a lot of technology, and I actually will do certain kinds of notes or graphing. I mentioned Venn diagrams. I love to do Venn diagrams, and I will do things like that, visuals like that in Good Notes on my iPad, and I'll use my Apple Pencil. So it's still the effect of writing, but it's but it's digital. But I do
Yeah.
have to say that the handwriting itself, it's the processing of the in between. And so I guess I've described not only how I track my goals and my successes, but how I manage my information and my tasks. And it's very much a hybrid. I mean, the calendars,
Yeah.
all of that is digital. But to me, and I think it's a big part of what I do as a productivity coach, is figuring out that middle part. It's all well and good to be like, I have this appointment with you today and we're going to record a podcast. And I have this other appointment with a client earlier. And then I also have, a collaboration call with someone. Great. Those are appointments. They're on the calendar. We got to work around them. But what about the other tasks that I need to get done to push the needle forward in my business?
Mm-hmm.
And what about, and I love that you mentioned this, time to reflect on all those great notes that we took.
Mm-hmm.
So important.
We have like genius ideas all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we don't really actually put it down somewhere, it might have gone to somebody else or whoever. I don't know. When we're inspired, we need to really act on it, or at least put it on somewhere so that you can revisit next time.
Exactly. And so there's different levels of acting. So the first is the capturing that you're talking about. And that could be in Notion, it could be in Trello, it could be in ClickUp, any place like that. The real key is getting it out of your head in a safe place and then processing it accordingly. And then the next level of action that you're talking about is sharing it. And I do think that that is a big thing with those who are gifted, those who are multi-passionate. And I highly encourage that too. I had a similar experience in that years ago. I want to say it was maybe 2017. I set up some worksheets that I use for every client, and they're part of my free library now. So people can go access them on their own. And then, of course, it's a deeper experience when we work together. And one of them is for decluttering the mind, which again, same thing that I'm just recommending. And the other one is called the Joy List. And it's a set of prompts of questions that you answer. It helps you find your joy, but it's not what you think. Yes, it's what inspires you and what you find joyful, but it becomes your list self-care guide, because then you look back to those things and say, ooh, that I need to bring more of that into my life, into my week, into my day. I look back at those and it's been a while now and I'm like, these are good.
I know, right?
But you're right. When you're in that flow, when you're in that moment of inspiration, capture it, share it,
Yes.
do it.
Oh my God. Okay. Everyone go download Lisa's freebie link. But
Awesome.
I have one last question. But before,
Yeah.
tell us where people can find you and any exciting new project or anything you want to share.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Thank you. So positivelyproductive.com is the main location on the interwebs, but I have the most fun and I'd be delighted if you join me on Instagram at positively_Lisa for fun and ridiculous reels and stress management. And then of course, if you are into listening to podcasts, the Positively Living podcast, I would love to have you join me there. And in terms of what I'm doing, I've got, as I mentioned, the free library, the podcast. On that side of things, I love working one-on-one, but I am working on something in the middle. I have found that it's great to download a worksheet, but sometimes that download sits there neglected. Does that sound
We're very
familiar?
much
Right?
collector too.
Yes, we are, aren't we? And so, given that, trying to help with that, I am just in the process of designing a set of workshops. I have the first one ready to go that I'm planning to do on March 23rd, and I'm planning to do more of them where we go through these worksheets. This first one, the Joy List worksheet, will be part of a 5-step self-care plan. It's to create a consistent self-care plan. And I'm calling them DIT workshops. Instead of DIY, do it yourself, this is do it together.
Oh, I love
So
that.
we take an hour to go through these things together. You know what you need to do, but this encourages you, creates accountability, and then you have my brain to pick after we're through. And I think it'll be very affordable in all respects, in terms of the time commitment, monetary, and all of that, in order to encourage action. Just like you said, when you're inspired, when you're ready, go for it. And I'm here to help.
I love that. I'll definitely make sure I include all the information in the show note. So
Thank you.
Final question for you is what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, you already know. Stop second guessing yourself. You already know.
I love that. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being the inspiration today. And I honor you for being on your journey and embracing your power. I can't wait to connect with you again and continue hearing about all the amazing things that you do.
Well, thank you, Kate. It's been my pleasure, and I'm so excited to support you in this podcast launch. This is going to be an incredible show, and I look forward to being on it and listening to it.
Thank you so much. That wraps up this episode, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. If this story served you in any way, I'd love for you to leave your review on this podcast. Don't forget to connect with me on my Instagram, Multipassionate Genius. And if you have a story to share, I would love to feature you here. So send me a message on my Instagram. Lastly, no matter what, I believe in you and I'm rooting for you. So go out there and create the life you want.